Chapter 14 of the Dettmer text does a nice job of kind of wrapping up um, issues around the collaboration that we find ourselves doing as educators throughout our careers and throughout our school systems. It talks a bit about leadership initially, and I think leadership is one of those things that we all define a little bit differently, and I think we all know people who have leadership qualities, but they are in fact very different from one another. The book talks about the capacity to influence people and represent them, to carry out responsibilities on their behalf. To be honest, the influence people piece doesn't sound very collaborative to me. Um, I think when we're collaborating with one another, there's someone who needs to facilitate meetings and things like that. But to be truly collaborative, we're not trying to overly influence one another. But we do want to make other people feel empowered to participate. We want to, celebrate their success. We must be good communicators. And I think to be a good communicator and one that really empowers others, there has to be a positive spin to what you're saying. And negative people don't normally do much to motivate the rest of us. And then there are many leaders who really have a more reflective style. So they're not the kind of leader that you think of who does try to influence people, but instead they help other folks reflect on what everyone's talking about in order to come to some sort of consensus. The text then talks about mentors, and we've alluded to and spoken about mentors and coaches a bit throughout this course, and they talk about it a lot in the ASD book with the compass model. But mentors really are working to have a shared relationship with someone. It has to be a voluntary kind of thing. I feel this way about co-teaching or team teaching, certainly about mentorships. I think they can be critically important for novice teachers, new people anywhere actually. But the mentor is to coach and model through experience, but not be a director of things, not give people directives about things, but advice, support, and an example. You need to have a personal relationship in order to do that. There has been research that shows that good mentor programs really do help new teachers. We know that there's a terrific number of new teachers who leave the field very quickly, terrible attrition statistics. And so having mentorship could certainly, and has been proven to, have an impact upon that. Talking about school administrators is interesting, I think, as well as school boards, which we're going to get to in a moment. I'm sure many of you have worked in multiple schools. I know I certainly have, and I find such a diversity among administrator style and their philosophy, or if you will, has such an impact upon the culture of the district or the schools separately, depending upon what level of administrator we're talking about. They may not be in our classrooms, but they certainly have an influence. And so they need to be a collaborative partner, and they need to be involved in what's happening in the classroom and know about that. They are obviously the persons who at some level provide us the time, space, materials, those kinds of things we have to have in order to collaborate. They do make decisions that really impact those things. They do make decisions around our professional development programs. We need to have a very clear um, idea of what the roles are in the collaborative process of the different folks in the school district with regard to their assigned job titles, but also their role in that collaborative group. I really truly believe that even at the building level, it's the principal that sets the tone for the culture of that school. And you can sense it the moment you walk in the door. And I've probably said this before, and I know you've all experienced it if you've been in schools much at all, that you get a real sense very quickly of what kind of building is this, and how do the teachers feel about their roles and their jobs, and how happy are the kids in this building, that kind of thing. So they're a critical piece of the puzzle. They're a critical piece of our success, and so they need to obviously be a collaborative partner. So it's important to remember their role in all of this. With school board members, the whole school board kind of setup, that structure in our school system, if you look at it from a distance, is a little bizarre. So we know that we have lots of folks making critical decisions about what we do as educators, who are oftentimes not educators at all. And I may have spoken to this point earlier as well. I worked in a district, and I may have said this, forgive me if I'm repeating myself, where there were school board members who had not graduated from high school. So we're dealing sometimes, not always for certain, but sometimes with folks with very specific agendas. Some school board members are school board members because they have students in the district, and when their students, or their children, excuse me, and when their children graduate, then they're no longer interested in the school board. So we know we have all of these different political scenarios going on. The problem is they're very influential, not just in the school, but then more broadly in the community because of their influence over the school. They set policies that, you know, really dictate everything that happens. And policy should be their focus, but teachers need, unfortunately, to engage sometimes. And so while we'd rather just focus on what we're doing in our classroom, it really isn't easy to do that and make any long-term changes if they're needed. So, and they're not fun to attend, but we should attend some school board meetings. We should know who our school board members are. We should understand their agendas, and we should be really active in informing them more about what's going on in our classrooms, what our responsibilities are, what our challenges are, what we need to do a better job, what kind of resources we need to do the best job we can, that kind of thing. But it's again another time constraint in our lives, but it's eventually or ultimately a critical piece of the puzzle that we have to think about. And now the touchy subject of professional development, and I don't know how you all feel about your Act 48 days or um, the kinds of programs that you encounter in those, and I hope they're wonderful. And I think sometimes, I know there are good ones out there, and I think often they can be what they're intended to be, which is informative. They help us to grow. They should also really kind of inspire and motivate, kind of rejuvenate us as professionals. I know, though, that I've been involved in many that did, in fact, the opposite. I've also been involved in conducting some professional development workshops and things, and I will tell you that the worst audience you can possibly have is a group of teachers. And I speak as a teacher when I say that. We can be very, very bad students, and I have students in quotes. So it's a tricky topic, and I think the reason it is because too often many of us have felt that our time's been wasted in professional development activities that we've had no input into, that really serve no purpose for us. They're not going to help us tomorrow when we go back in our classrooms. We've had no influence over what it is we're spending our time doing, and they're taking that time away from other things we desperately need to do. And that's the opposite of what they should be. So I hope that hasn't been your experience. It's too often been mine. But it should be a venue, and it's so critical now to be a venue to really expand our skills, because with technology, with inclusion, with our student population becoming ever more diverse, we need that time to kind of recharge, learn new skills, make our jobs easier. And so if that's not what's happening, it's a sad, sad waste of our time. So certainly teachers should have a lot of input into what those professional development hours are spent doing. The presentations need to be very high quality, wasting none of our time. Um, and they need to relate to what it is we're going to be doing the next day or the following Monday. Time is such a critical piece to teachers. I mean, there are very few jobs where you can't take a phone call when you need to, like teachers can't. And so I think a lot of people outside our profession don't understand what our days are like. And we should also very much be involved in evaluating programs so that they're better the next time around. So this is something I think I feel very strongly about, and I hope you've had really positive experiences with it. I've included a link in this this module. I hope you'll please read through with regard to professional development. It can be wonderful, and or it can be very awful waste of our time.